What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, and today I'm going to review and rank George Harrison's 12 solo albums that he put out in his career. How did we get to Harrison from Frank Zappa? Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of ways. Not only are a lot of the musicians who play on Harrison's albums musicians who played with Frank in the early 70s, all sorts of connections there, plus Frank covered the Beatles. George Harrison specifically mentions Frank Zappa in one of his songs. The connections are extensive, so we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. George Harrison's career is an interesting career. Like, I think had he stopped at All Things Must Pass, his sort of triple album that he put out, his first real solo album, though he had two like all instrumental solo albums before that. If he had put out All Things Must Pass and never made another album and had gone off and like done other things, I think his sort of status would be legendary. It would have just been this indulgent, over-the-top statement, and then he would have walked away from music, and I think that would have been pretty amazing. Because his solo albums don't reinvent anything. They are all pretty much George Harrison sounding solo albums. It reminds me a lot of Eric Clapton in the 70s, where he's just writing these sort of soft rock pop songs that are generally all 3 to 4 minutes long, generally all verse, chorus, first chorus. Like, there's no boundary break-in. There's nothing like that. But I do think there is some really good music that George Harrison has written. And that is out there. And so some of these albums I think are pretty enjoyable, but he's definitely not breaking down any barriers or doing anything too crazy or anything crazy at all for the most part. So, but they're good stuff. I mean, they're not one of them is great. But the rest of them are enjoyable listens, kind of safe. Lyrically, I think the lyrics might be his strong point. He has some pretty good lyrics. He has some bad lyrics too, but he's got some pretty good lyrics. He's got a lot of anger in him a lot of times, both kind of reacting to the public's reaction to him as an ex-Beatle, which was completely not cool. They wanted him still to be a Beatle, and he was trying to be a solo artist, and there was problems with his first tour, and people didn't appreciate that he wasn't indulging in the Beatles and all that stuff. So he had a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. There's some lyrics that are a little bit like angry. His spirituality obviously must have kept him balanced. There's a lot of spiritual songs. I usually don't like songs that are overly spiritual or overly indulgent in any kind of like personal religion, but I don't know, Harrison doesn't really preach as much as he just is, and I don't know, it kind of works for me. But yeah. So anyways, I'm just going to go through the list, and then at the end I'll put it on the screen, or maybe I will. I think I will. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, there's 12 of them. So yeah, let's do it. Here we go. On to number 12. So I put these two, I don't really have anything to say separately about them, number 12 and number 11. Number 12 being electronic sound, which is 2 tracks of electronic music. And then Wonderwall music, which is like a soundtrack to a movie, Wonderwall, bunch of short instrumentals, a little more of like the Indian sound that we hear from the Beatles with like sitars and that kind of energy. I do think Wonderwall music is a little more interesting. I think some of the songs are a little more engaging. Electronic sound really is kind of avant-garde, ambient electronic noises. An 18-minute piece, like a 25-minute piece. Sometimes I will play electronic sound in the background, like during centers is what we call it, in my kindergarten class when the kids are kind of roaming around. And it creates some really interesting sort of like soundscapes when the kids are reacting to these weird noises, or we all forget that this has been playing in the background. And we're like, well, what's that noise? What's going on? So electronic sound has provided some interesting moments for us. But it's definitely not something that I think is too interesting to sit down and listen to. Both of them are kind of background music type things, personally, if you ask me. But that would be my number 10 and my number 12 and number 11. Electronic sound at number 12, Wonderwall music at number 11. Number 10 is Gone Troppo, his 1982 affair, his 10th album. The sound on this is pretty rough. It's just horrible, like 80s sort of generic keyboard sound that just kind of immediately represents some of the worst stuff of the 80s. Um, there's a fun little instrumental on here called Grease that kind of has some good energy. But there's not a lot on this album that really, I don't know, that is really stands out. I would say like it's probably by far the weakest of his sort of 10 actual solo albums where there's songs and not just instrumentals. Um, Grease has some nice energy. The closing song Circles has some nice kind of energy to it. But I think maybe all of it is a little better if the production has a little more to it. A lot of his production is very sort of like, I don't know, it doesn't have a lot of bass presence, or if there's drums, they're not hitting hard. There's not a lot of like muscle in a lot of his production. And I think this, more than any album, it suffers from that. But yeah, I also don't think there's that one standout track. Almost all of these albums have one standout track that's like absolutely fantastic. Gone Troppo, I don't think does. So, anyways, that would be my number 10. Number 9 is the album that came before Gone Troppo, Somewhere in England, and this one kind of put George kind of back on the map a little bit because there was a song on here which was originally not intended to be about John Lennon, but then John Lennon was assassinated prior to the release of this, and so one of the songs all those years ago was redone. The lyrics were changed to be about John Lennon. I think even like Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney and showed up to perform on the track, like backing vocals, and so it became like a Beatles thing, and it became a hit. I remember the video got played a lot back in the day, just because it was like essentially a slideshow of Lennon and the Beatles and stuff like that. So this is a pretty good. This is I think a step up from Gone Troppo quite a ways. Very much of more of an updated sound. The opening song, Blood of a Clone, name drops Frank Zappa, kind of a weird little new wave-esque pop number that's actually pretty good. We got Unconsciousness Rules, which is an odd little title for a song. Really nice bass in there. Sort of some nice. There's a lot of saxophone in his songs, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Over the course of Unconsciousness Rules, the saxophone does not work for me, and then it kind of gets jammy and stretches out and gets some like room to like go. Then it gets good. So over the course of one song, it goes from bad to good. All those years ago, I think that's a great song. Could have been on Let It Be. I think it's a great song. That was the one that became a hit. Baltimore Oriole has a Feels Like a, which is a cover of a song from somebody, right? I don't know who originally sang Baltimore Oriole, but I think it's a cover. Hoagie Carmichael, yeah, it's like a classic. This one reminds me of a like a Duran Duran. No, that's Wham, Careless Whisper, or Duran Duran, Save a Prayer. Has that new wavy kind of ballad energy that I actually think kind of works. Teardrops, which I believe was a single, is a horrible song. Definitely one of those bad songs. It's just a bad pop number. The Witch I Have Lost, The Witch I Have Lost, that which I have lost. I don't know why I couldn't say that. Kind of a good little acoustic energy, some bright, upbeat acoustic energy, kind of saves the album after the horrible teardrops. Hong Kong Blues starts off with the gong, which just bothers me. Cheesy pop, and then the closing, "Save the World," about saving the world. It's kind of a nice saving the world from us humans. It's kind of, I don't know, weirdly upbeat. It has a weird energy that like not upbeat hopeful, but almost upbeat quirky, which is weird for a song called Save the World. But not it's definitely, I don't say a bad album. Teardrops is, I think, a bad song. But for the most part, it's a pretty fun album. And I do think All Those Years Ago is a pretty good hit. But anyways, that would be my number 9, Somewhere in England. Number 8 is Extra Texture. Read all about it. This opens up with one of his best songs, You. Just this really positive, upbeat, classic George Harrison declaration of love type thing. It is so good and so catchy that side A opens up with You and side B opens up with a 40 seconds, 5 second song called A Bit More of You, which is literally a fade in and a fade out of like just the instrumental part of You. Odd little choice, but it kind of works. There's some pretty good songs on here. This guitar, Can't Keep From Crying, I guess, which is like sort of a follow-up to While My Guitar Gently Weeps. It's sort of a Wilco-esque dad rock type thing. Some really good piano drum energy, very clean drum palette, like not a lot of cymbal work, so you don't have that clutter of the cymbals. World of Stone is a cool sort of mid-tempo, one of those songs that starts off slow and then the middle of it kind of goes into like this like kind of little groove, this little stomp in the middle of it. Gray Cloudy Lies is kind of depressing, but it's a really nice solid ballad. And then the closing, His Name Is Legs, ladies and gentlemen, is sort of a fun, irreverent, quirky George Harrison having a good time closing number. An absolutely great song in the opener. Couple other great songs in this guitar, Gray Cloudy Lies, some good energy in like World of Stone, the closing, His Name Is Legs. It's a pretty consistent album. I do think there were maybe a couple songs that just don't do anything for me, but for the most part, this might even be better than number 8. I might want to put this higher if I revisited this, but it's a pretty good album. I like this, but that would be my number 8. Extra Texture, read all about it. Number 7 is the album that followed that, 33 1/3. This came out in 1976. Starts off with not a good song. I don't think the first opening song, Women Don't You Cry For Me, is very good. Already we're starting to get a very disco vibe on here, which I'm kind of okay with. I'm a big disco fan, but like just the production, like the drums and the bass are a little more up front. So you're getting that sort of rhythmic drive that disco would like demand albums have. And one of them, there's a song, Dear One. So the first two songs, Dear One has a weird bass tone that kind of doesn't work for me. But the rest of this album is pretty good. Like it starts off kind of strong, kind of weak, but after that it gets really good. This song is just great. Open, awesome bass line. It sounds like they're going to go into sugar pie, honey, but sugar pie, you know that. Sounds like that. Some self-referential lyrics about this song does this song does this, that kind of See Yourself is a fun little number that has some like weird rhythmic things where he's kind of playing with like a stop and start type rhythm. There's a cover of a Cole Porter song on here that's pretty good. It's What You Value is like a good mid-tempo rocker that kind of reminds me of Tom Petty, which is interesting because, 10 years after this, he would be with Tom Petty and the Traveling Wilburys. Pure Smokey, which is about Smokey Robinson, about that voice, is just pure, smooth jam territory, and it works. It's fantastic. And then Cracker Bark Palace closes out with some nice, bright, not closes out, but it's one of the last songs with some nice, bright, poppy energy. You know what? As I'm sitting here right now doing this, in the final list, I'm switching Extra Texture and this one, 33. I'm realizing that in real time as I do this. That opening 2-song thing hurts this too much, even though everything from there on I think is pretty solid. So this is now number 8, and the other one is now number 7. I've switched it in real time. I apologize for that. But just looking at these, I do think Extra Texture is slightly, the momentum of You kicking it off kind of propels it a little bit farther than the momentum that doesn't exist on this album. But yeah, that would be my number 8, which used to be number 7, 33 1/3. But now we're on to number 6. Number 6 is his 8th studio album, the self-titled George Harrison. This came out in 1979. Very 70s album. It kind of reminds me of like an Eric Clapton album. There's a little bit of like Paul McCartney pop on here, some ELO type stuff on here. Again, I think our production is a little more updated and we feel like we're kind of catching up with the times. There's a nice sort of solid a keyboard foundation that kind of is underneath all the songs that kind of supports them up, that just gives them this like buoyancy and this bounce that's really nice. Strong opener and Love Comes to Everyone. The Soft-Hearted Hannah is a really neat sort of McCartney-esque song that apparently is about psychedelics, because I think the first line, he smokes something and then everything goes crazy after that. Kind of reminds me of like a Beatlesque mid-period song. Like this could have been on like Sgt. Pepper's, or maybe even Revolver or White Album, something like from that era. Blow Away has some really nice, pleasant 70s soft rock. Has that great just George Harrison slide guitar sound on it. Faster has some ELO vibes, which I'm all about the ELO. Dark Sweet Lady is a nice acoustic number. Soft Touch is kind of maybe the musical equivalent of a soft touch, doesn't offer much. But the If You Believe is a nice sort of positive thinking closing song that's pretty good. Just a strong album. Like, I don't think there's that one song that this one maybe doesn't have that one absolute jewel of a song, but I don't think there's anything bad on here. The production is not distracting. There's no stinkers of songs other than Soft Touch, which is maybe just there, but it's not offensive anyway. But yeah, it's an enjoyable album. That would be my number 6, George Harrison. Number 5 is his last album, which was released after he passed away. Apparently, he hadn't finished it, and then a couple other people. I want to say his son, Jeff Lynne. I think the drummer Jim Keltner got together, and they sort of like finished it for him. And it's a really, really good album. Some absolutely great songs, including the first 2 songs, which start off with just some absolutely really strong sort of that weird George Harrison type pop. Absolutely amazing start. And really, there's nothing at all bad on here. I think towards the end, we just maybe it gets a little long and the songs kind of run together. But for the most part, it is just a really fantastic, really enjoyable album. Starts off incredibly, incredibly strong, which is like the best part about it. It just 2 really great songs to open up. Rising Sun is a song, really cool lyrics, good melody. Maria Blues is a nice, chill, tasty instrumental. Mara Blues, Marwa, Mara Blues, really cool, chill instrumental. Between the Devil into the Deep Blue Sea has a nice, like, ukulele, light, upbeat sort of ukulele flavor in it. Rocking Chair in Hawaii is as lazy as the title. It's a pretty lazy, chill song. But then the closing, Brainwashed, is a really, really nice sort of a closing upbeat number. He's attacking a bunch of people that were brainwashed by very specific attacks, like brainwashed by the Dow Jones and stuff like that. He's like getting very in the weeds about the things we're brainwashed. He even says there's a line that even got my grandma when she was working for the mob. Some really good stuff. And then they close out with like a nice spiritual chant ending, which feels like it's tacked on to the song, but feels completely appropriate for the final statement of George Harrison. So anyways, a really good, surprisingly fun album. It's a little long, maybe. How long is it? It's about, what is it? It's 47 minutes long. I maybe drop a couple tracks, get it down to 40, and it's maybe a little more streamlined and a little better. But for the most part, a really, really, really good album. That would be his 12th, Brainwashed. Number 4 is Dark Horse, his 5th. So this came out in 74. So this is the album that has taken a lot of heat, and deservedly so. Because apparently he had laryngitis when he was recording this. So some of the vocals are pretty bad. Like, check out the title track. But it's a really good album, and it is like a dark horse of an album. It has very Eric Clapton energy. So much so that the first song is like a jammy instrumental to start off. I think Eric Clapton might even be on this album. Is he? Maybe not. But it is very, no, he is not. He is very jammy, sort of. The opening is like a jamming instrumental, which reminds me of Eric Clapton's debut album. But it works, and because George Harrison had laryngitis, maybe it makes sense that they open up with an instrumental. Simply Shady is a nice little mid-tempo rock number that goes really well after the opening instrumental. Bye Bye Love is kind of a weird take on the Everly Brothers song. Maya Love has some nice electric piano, some nice slide guitar work, very Let It Be Beatles sound. We're still very much, a lot of like George's like Beatlesque stuff reminds me of something that would work really well on Let It Be. So it's interesting. I don't know. We're not going to get into the Beatles. Very good vibes on My Love. One bad song on here. It's called Ding Dong, Ding Dong. Horrible title. Not that good of a song, but I definitely don't think it's bad enough to like drag this album too far down the list. We got the title track Dark Horse, which definitely has some laryngitis problems, but is a nice rollicking type number that works. Far East Man, by far the best song on here, has a very like smooth jazz, not smooth jazz, but smooth jam territory, almost R&B-ish. Kind of reminds me of Ween's My Party, that type of vibe, but it works. It's good. I don't know. I really, really like this album. It feels more 70s than anything else. Opening up with like a random instrumental jam, having some nice smooth jazz in there, a weird Everly Brothers cover, some bad singing because of laryngitis. It's a special little album, but I think it's maybe underappreciated, but it's really entertaining. But that would be a Dark Horse, my number 4. Number 3 is Cloud 9. This is the first time I ever really got into George Harrison. When this came out, and this was pretty much all over MTV and the radio. This was his sort of Jeff Lynne saving him, resurrecting his career in really big fashion. It's got some really, really good upbeat, catchy pop songs, and that's when I like it. It's got opens up with Cloud 9, which is more of a not slower, but more of a trippier type, darker number. But then we have the awesome Fish on the Sand, which is upbeat pop. When We Was Fab, another Beatles song, which works, which closes out with a nice little like sitar-y jam at the end. Just like nice little, yeah, we get it. If we're gonna do that, we're gonna fully indulge and throw some sitar action at the end, which is pretty cool. The second song, That's What It Takes, doesn't really work for me. That song reminds me of a Wilson Phillips song. It has that sort of, if Wilson Phillips was singing the song, it probably would have been a good hit. Devil's Radio, again, there he is attacking like the rest of the music industry, but it's a really good song. Wreck of the Hesperus is a really good song. His cover of Rudy Clark's Got My Mind Set on You is the thing that made this album. I think the upbeat stuff is a little more better than the ballady stuff on this, but the upbeat stuff is really good. The When We Was Fab has some very Glass Onion White Album energy about it. It even has a Bob Dylan reference in it. He mentions It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. He specifically, that I think is one of the lines. Get this random Bob Dylan reference in there. There is the slower Someplace Else, which has some very nice George Harrison guitar playing. But yeah, I don't know. It's a fun album. It's got a couple slower spots that don't work, but I do think it's a good return to form. And Eric Clapton is on this one, and he plays some good guitar on this one. So anyways, yeah, that would be my number 2. His number 11, Cloud 9. That's my number 3. My number 3. My number 2 is Living in the Material World, his 4th album. Yeah, and this is just sort of following the one that is number 1, which was his 3rd album. This is sort of that, but maybe not as aggressive. The one that's number 1 is a triple album, a single album version of that, with some of the same energy, but just definitely not as heavy and not as aggressive. But for the most part, from start to finish, a really, really good album. Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth, great opening song. Like, I don't think anybody does sort of cheesy spirituality better than George Harrison. Supertramp's another band that comes to mind. Roger Hudson has some very spiritual stuff that works for me. But this opening really works. I think it's a great opening song. In fact, all four of the first four songs, "Give Me Love," "Sue Me, Sue You Blues," "The Light That Has Lighted the World," and "Don't Let Me Wait Too Long," just awesome songs, one right after the other. Really good, strong opening, opening four-shot salvo. Lord Loves the One has some nice organ work. Try Some, Buy Some has a nice sort of Beatlesque quality about it, with sort of this orchestral build that kind of gives it this sort of like grander, not quite Long and Winding Road type build up, not at all like that, but this nice sort of orchestral build up. Very Beatlesque melody. But yeah, it's just a strong album. This is one where there's nothing wrong with it. This is like George Harrison distilled to like a really good 45 minutes. You get a little bit of everything he does. You got a song called "Be Here Now," very spiritual, Eastern philosophy type thing. But yeah, really good album, really enjoyable album from start to finish. And that would be my number 2, "Living in the Material World." Which means that number 1 is the absolutely ridiculous "All Things Must Pass." Just an indulgent, absolutely perfect, awesome release. Psych rock like crazy, a band that just jams like crazy. There are 3 LPs. The first 2 are like normal songs, and then the third one is called Apple Jams and includes a bunch of jams with like Eric Clapton, George Harrison, Dave Mason is on here jamming. And the jams, a couple of them are really, really good. A couple of them are maybe more just throwaways, but there is a very jam band aesthetic to a lot of the songs on here, like this sort of like songs where we're throwing everything in the mix. We got horns and we got guitars and we got all this crazy stuff and we got background vocals, but there's like a jam feel about it. Like the awesome Wah Wah has that. Let It Down has this awesome, real cool jam feel. There's just a lot of really good jam energy on here, and then just absolutely amazing songs. "My Sweet Lord" is on here. "Isn't It a Pity" is on here. Cover of "If Not For You" is on here. There are just "All Things Must Pass," the title track, is on here. It is just side after side of George Harrison doing like his absolute just best. I want to say, and I don't know because I haven't gone that far down like a George Harrison rabbit hole, that a lot of these songs had been written when he was in the Beatles, and this was his chance to like finally do something with them because Lennon and McCartney had no interest in them. I don't know which songs there are. I don't know if that's true, but Beatles would have been a completely different band had any of these songs been in there. And these are some pretty good songs. But this album has like Eric Clapton is on it. Bobby Whitlock is on it. I want to say it was these sessions that formed Derek and the Dominoes, right? After this, then they formed Derek and the Dominoes. Jim Gordon is on here. We got a connection to Frank Zappa. Carl Radle is on here. So we got definitely that. All right, Ringo Starr's on here. Billy Preston's on here. Yeah, we got Peter Frampton apparently plays on here. Dave Mason is on here. Ginger Baker is on here during one of the jams. John Lennon is on one of the jams. Yoko Ono. They're just clapping their hands, but they're on one of the jams. But yeah, it is just, if this had been his only release other than like Wonderwall music and electronic sound, it would have been like, what a way to go out. You drop this and then you're done with the music business. But I really like the jam side of this too. That is something that I've come around to more in the years. There's some really good energy. The opening jam on like the last LP, the first one, Out of the Blue, just kind of, we start off mid-jam. Like you can tell, they just jammed in the studio and then they just started where they thought it was the most interesting. They give us like 12 minutes of that jam. Interesting. One of them, Thanks for the Pepperoni, has a very sort of is pretty much just a riff on like a jam based on like a Chuck Berry, like da na 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 na, like riff, straight up Chuck Berry rave up. I Remember Jeep has some really nice tasty guitar playing. I think Clapton, Mason, and Harrison all solo on that. Out of the Blue is definitely heavier, has more swagger. The jams are really fun, but I do think they're more of like a dessert after the awesomeness of the first 4 sides. But yeah, a near perfect album. Absolutely amazing. But yeah, that's it. Those right there. Those are my thoughts on George Harrison's albums with the two switched, as I said I would do. Extra texture now at 7, 33 and a third at 8. So, anyways, those are my thoughts on George Harrison. Let me know if you ever listen to George Harrison, what your thoughts are. If you've not heard All Things Must Pass, you need to go back and fix that because it's an absolutely ridiculously fantastic album. But anyways, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, and go listen to music, people. Go listen to all the music because why not? All right, peace. Talk to you later.